Yo guys, it's Neil again, with another episode of the Energy Academy. Now we know what generation and demand mean, you need to understand how electricity travels from generation sites to the places where the demand is coming from. The electricity produced by generators travels through wires and cables to where it needs to be. There are two types of networks that help electricity travel from one place to another, and they're essentially differentiated by size in more than one sense. Those two networks are defined by the geographical size of the networks themselves, by the voltage of the cables, and by the size of the generators they're connected to. The major nationwide ones are called transmission networks. A transmission network is made up of long-distance, high-voltage cables that can transmit very large amounts of electricity. Therefore, it might be helpful to think of transmission networks as the motorways of the electricity system. Electricity produced makes its way from generation sites, power stations and wind turbines to the transmission network. But what is voltage? Voltage is the pressure that pushes electricity from one place to another. The wires in your domestic appliances, like kettles for example, are around 200 volts, which just means they're designed to withstand pressure of 200 volts. At a national scale, when we talk about the transmission of electricity, those wires and cables are hundreds of kilovolts, so thousands of times bigger. The wires and cables in the transmission network have physical limits on how much power can be pushed along them. Those limits therefore need to be taken into account when deciding how much electricity travels across which wires across however many miles to its destination. But who looks after the physical infrastructure of the transmission network? Those wires and cables. In England and Wales, they're owned and looked after and maintained and improved upon by National Grid Electricity Transmission, or National Grid ET for short. National Grid ESO, the system operator I introduced earlier, who are responsible for balancing supply and demand, and National Grid ET, who look after the physical infrastructure of the transmission system, are two separate entities, albeit both operating under the National Grid umbrella. In Scotland, it's slightly different. The system operator is still National Grid ESO. However, the transmission networks are looked after by Scottish Power Transmission or Scottish and Southern Energy Networks Transmission, depending on which part of Scotland you're in. In the next episode, I'll look at the smaller networks, the ones that take electricity from the transmission networks to your homes and businesses. I'll see you there.